The Jarl did not explain himself. He had not done so in 20 years of rule, and he did not begin now. Each harvest season, his collectors moved through the valley settlements, quiet men with ledgers and carts. They took a portion of the grain, a measure of the salted meat, and stacked timber on the sledges and hauled it north of the citadel. Every year, without ceremony, without account given. The Jarl watched the stores grow from the high window of his hall. He did not smile. He had seen what was coming in the behaviour of the animals 3 winters prior. The elk moving early, the birds gone before the first frost. Small signs to most men, but to the Jarl, they were a ledger of their own, one he had been reading for 40 years in this land. He had done the calculations in private by lamplight over many nights. He knew how long it would last. He knew how much would be required. So he began the collection the following spring. The villagers noticed the pattern before they named it. A second cart where there had been one. A measure taken from the stores that left the shelf lighter than the year before. Whispers moved the way cold moves, without announcement, arriving everywhere at once. The Jarl held no assemblies. He issued no explanations. He closed the citadel gates at dusk and did not open them again until morning. And in the absence of words, the villagers supplied their own. A man named Osvald lost his eldest son to a fever that winter. He did not have enough wood to keep the fire through the worst of it. He did not blame the fever. He stood at the edge of the village and looked north towards the citadel, and he named what he saw there. Others had been naming it quietly for months, and now they named it together. The rebellion came at the last harvest, just before the heavy snows. It was not chaotic. That was what the Jarl had not accounted for, that they were not a mob. They were men who believed they were right, moving with the particular calm of people who have decided. The citadel gate came down before midnight. The Jarl offered no resistance. He stood in the courtyard as they moved past him towards the storehouses. He held no weapon. He said nothing. The fire was not planned. A torch dropped, and dry timber caught. The stores went quickly. Grain, salted meat, the carefully split wood stacked to the rafters, and by dawn, the citadel was ash and standing walls. The Jarl was gone. No one saw where. Osvald found the ledges in the stone annex the fire had not reached. He was not a man who read easily, but he read these, column after column, every family in the valley named, every measure of grain allocated against the length of winter the Jarl had projected. The distribution weighed towards the households with the most children. The poorest families received the largest portion. Osvald turned the pages slowly. Outside, the first real snow had begun. He sat on the stone floor of the annex and held the ledgers open across his knees. He did not move for a long time. The ledger was always there, every measure accounted for, every family named. The work of years set down in columns, precise and complete, and entirely invisible to the people it was meant to serve. That is the thing to note, not the tragedy of it, not the waste, but the plain fact that a man can be correct about everything and still produce ruin. The quality of his care is not in question. The care was real. It was also sealed inside a stone building, behind a closed gate, communicated to no one. What a man holds in private stays there. The world does not read intentions. There is a difference between possessing something and transmitting it. A man can carry warmth the way a stone carries heat, absorbing it, holding it, giving none of it to the air around him. The stone is warm, but the room is cold. This is not a failure of character. It is a failure of understanding what character actually requires of a man who holds responsibility for others. The Jarl understood his land. He understood the seasons, the animals, the mathematics of survival across a decade of hard winters. What he did not understand, or did not consider necessary, was that the people he was protecting were also reading him. Every day, every closed gate, every silence. They were doing what people do. They were filling the absence of information with the most available explanation. And the most available explanation for a man who takes without speaking is that he is taking. Osvald did not rebel because he was foolish. He rebelled because the evidence as he could see it was coherent. A man in grief, with cold children and lighter grain shelf, looking north at a citadel growing fat. The conclusion he reached was not unreasonable. It was simply wrong. And it was wrong because the Jarl had provided nothing to make it right. Silence is not neutral. In the presence of power, silence speaks. It says, "I do not owe you an explanation." And that might be true. It may even be a defensible position for a man to hold. But defensible and functional are not the same thing. Most men confuse the interior with the sufficient. They know what they mean. They know what they feel. They know the quality of their own care, their own discipline, their own intent. And somewhere in that knowing, they conclude that others must also know. But others do not. The interior of a man is not legible from the outside. What is legible is posture, behaviour, the small and repeated acts that either confirm or contradict what a man holds inside him. A man who is generous but never seen giving is not generous to the people watching. A man who is protective but never explains his protection is not protective to the people living under it. He is simply powerful and closed. And a closed, powerful man, in the absence of evidence to the contrary, will be read as dangerous. The Jarl, standing in the courtyard as the rebellion moved past him towards the stores, knew what they were about to destroy, and he did not stop them. A man who will not speak to prevent the destruction of his own life's work is a man who has concluded that the speaking was never going to be enough. That conclusion may have been correct, but it arrived too late to be useful. The gate that stayed closed for years could not be opened in a moment of fire. Trust does not accumulate in the dark. A man who holds something of value has a responsibility that extends beyond the holding. The holding is only the first part. The transmission is the work. Not because the people deserve an explanation, not because authority requires justification, but because a closed gate, held long enough, becomes its own message, and that message, once received, is very difficult to correct. The first snow falls outside. Osvald sits on the stone floor. The ledger is open, but the stores are ash.